Hello, David Moore, IRA Advantage, and today's question is a self-directed IRA a good idea? Now, that's sort of a funny question, but I guess that's sort of like asking, is diversification a good idea? We don't sell investments or give investment advice in here at IRA Advantage. We just provide the investment vehicle people need to get where they want to go. So as far as whether a self-directed IRA is a good idea or not, it's really just a question of, do you think diversification is a good idea? And if you look at the numbers, it's been said that roughly 2% of IRA or 401k money is in real estate. That doesn't really sound like diversification to me. The only way you're going to get that real estate if you want direct ownership, your financial advisor might talk to you about REITs. Well, that's a stock. You're not going to get the actual benefits of true real estate ownership there. You're buying a stock that contains that. But as far as if you want to go out and buy a house or buy a business property, buy something else where you're actually getting the attributes of real property, a self-directed IRA is the only way you're going to do that. If you want to buy gold and silver and actually have physical custody of it, that's the only way you're going to get it done. If you want to diversify into anything outside of Wall Street's offerings, a truly self-directed IRA is really the only way you're going to go. So is that a good idea for you? I don't know why it wouldn't be. As far as objections that people may have to taking your retirement account to go buy real estate or other self-directed investments, often when people come to us talking about real estate, somebody will have told them, nah, you shouldn't buy real estate because if you buy real estate with an IRA or 401k plan, you're going to lose the long-term capital gains tax consequence. You're going to lose interest deductions or depreciation. It's not a liquid asset. So at the end of the day, if you've got to take an RMD, that required minimum distribution at 70.5, what happens if you need to take that RMD and you don't have the cash to do it? Well, all these things are really, it's a question of who's asking the question and what the point of it is. Because if you're talking about the loss of long-term capital gains tax, interest deductions, depreciation, all those things, give me an example of an IRA or 401k owned asset that gives you those things. So those are really moot points in my mind. It doesn't really matter whether it's in real estate or anything else. As far as the liquidity and RMDs are concerned, that's one of those things where it's looked at as a problem, but yet it's, in my mind, a true opportunity. Because if we're talking about an in-service distribution, then people are typically contemplating cash. And when you get those RMDs, once again, they're typically contemplating a cash distribution. That's sort of the way the retirement world looks at these distributions. But there's nothing in the law stating it has to be cash. You can always take an in-kind distribution. And taking in-kind distributions actually have some opportunities there. As far as the value of it, what is something truly worth? An appraiser of piece of property is going to have a hard time giving you a value if they're just putting a value on an asset. If you've got a sale pending, then you've got a buyer and a seller that are agreeing to a price. But when you're looking at purely just sticking a value on something, there's obviously some room there back and forth. The second piece of it is if you're taking a piece of something, a minority interest in an asset as a distribution, it's possible to discount that valuation by up to 40%. So by getting away from cash distributions, you have tremendous opportunities when you look at in-kind distributions. And usually when we're looking at Wall Street stuff, we're not going to have that opportunity. But if we're looking at self-directed accounts, I believe that we have lots of people, if somebody says, hey, can you buy a retirement home with your retirement account? Well, yes, you can. Can you use it before it's taken as a distribution? No. But look at this opportunity. You buy that property and you can't use it till it's taken fully as a distribution. But let's say you buy that property in a limited liability company. And every year for a few years, you just do an assignment of membership interest, a minority interest in that limited liability company. You don't even have to have a deed drawn. You're just shifting the membership interest in the limited liability company to accommodate the distributions that you either want to take or you have to take in the RMD situation. And by taking that minority interest, you can actually discount the valuation of that distribution dramatically. So this is something that's done in the estate planning world with gifting all the time, but I don't see it done in the qualified world much. But it's something that we work with regularly. When somebody, back to that house, you take a piece of it over a series of years. What's the downside of taking an in-kind distribution? If you take a cash distribution, you've got the cash to pay the tax obligation. If you're taking an in-kind distribution, you're taking an asset out, and you're not really receiving anything to pay that tax obligation. So a great solution to that is just take a couple minority interest distributions. After you've taken those, before you actually realize that tax obligation, do a cash out refinance of the property, and boom, there you go. You didn't have to come out of pocket any money at all, and now the asset's yours. You want to move into it, you want to do whatever you want to do, it's yours. So that's something that, once again, is looked at as a problem oftentimes by financial people, whether we're talking to the tax people or the Wall Street people, and really I look at it as a tremendous opportunity. So that's number one thing to look at in that situation. So is a self-directed IRA a good idea? Diversification, is that a good idea? But understand, in a self-directed world, you've got to do some more work. I mean, if you make a bad investment, it's on your back. You can't go blame anybody else for it. So part 2 this week is, what is UBTI in an IRA? Well, unrelated business taxable income is what UBTI is. How would we be exposed to that? Well, any IRA-owned asset, if we're looking at whether it's Roth or traditional IRA, if you go out and you buy a property, it's 50% loan to value, any income or gain attributable to other people's money. So whether it's a bank loan or a seller carryback, any type of situation where you're gaining benefit, you're making money off other people's money, the government doesn't want to see that, or they don't want to see it actually without some tax exposure. So if it's something, even with a Roth-owned property, if it's 50% loan to value, you're going to pay tax on half the income in a given year. Not you, but your account has tax exposure on that. And then half the gain on disposition. So if I go back 20 years ago or so, there was a person in the IRA world that would, and this is before we had IRA Advantage, we were strictly doing 1031 exchanges at the time with Equity Advantage, 1031exchange.com. But the thing that was interesting was this guy in the IRA world was trying to sell self-directed IRAs in opposition to 1031. Well, they're apples and oranges, two totally different things. And I guess the one thing I'd say is there's actually situations where an IRA would need to do an exchange. Even a Roth IRA might have to do an exchange if there's leverage on it to get away from that tax exposure, or not away from it, let's not say, but to defer that tax exposure. The other way that UBTI might come into your world is, for example, let's say you've got an apartment complex and the apartment complex has a laundromat in it. Well, the laundromat's one source of income for the apartment complex, which is an investment. Shouldn't have exposure in that situation. Talk to your tax people about it, but shouldn't be. If we go the other direction, say, okay, gee, this apartment complex had this great laundromat that I was doing well with, and now I want to go out and buy a laundromat. I've got an opportunity to go buy this laundromat with my retirement account. So you go do it. Well, now what have you done? Is the laundromat an investment or is it a business? It's a business. So you're going to be subject to that UBTI once again in that situation. So when you're looking at things, if we're looking at the 1031 context, we look at things, for example, if somebody wants to flip properties, they want to argue all day long with me that they're holding it for investment. Well, they're not. Flipping properties is property held for resale. It's a dealer property. Look up a court case, the Clarkowski court case, and it gives 9 points that are used to determine dealer status. We've used that for 30 years in the exchange business, and I sort of look at that same thing and apply it to my IRA 401k clients. You start looking at what this thing is. If you're flipping property, once again, with an IRA 401k plan, it's not something, it's not an investment. It starts to look like a business, and anytime you've got that situation, you're going to be subject to the UBIT. don't look at this as a reason to do or not to do something. Just understand there's potentially going to be some tax exposure. Have your tax people work on those numbers and go into it knowing what those would be. Once again, it doesn't mean you should or should not do something. It's just another factor to consider before making that investment. I hope you've found some benefit to listening to us this week, and please do not hesitate ever to reach out with any questions or concerns you may have. If you have questions and you'd like us to address them in a video, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to take questions, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you once again, David Moore, IRA Advantage, IRAadvantage.com. Thank you.